Welcome back. This is going to be a bit of a longer video. I'm going to talk about this Recce rifle, what the application is of a rifle such as this, how I have it set up, and some tips for you guys as to how to kind of get the most out of a rifle like this. So traditionally, these kind of rifles were designed to be a light precision rifle that's a complement, a heavier, like a 7.62 precision gun, but eventually it started to be used as a DMR rifle or kind of a sniper's rifle on its own. There's a whole lot of different flavors and variations. You can get really deep into it, but bottom line is you're looking for a sub-minute 5.56 gun with a good magnified optic, and that's kind of what you're shooting for in order to get the maximum performance out of a rifle like this, pun intended as far as that goes. So what I have here is a rifle that I had built a long time ago, and we'll talk through some of these pieces here. So first thing, we got a stainless steel Douglas barrel. It's a 16-inch barrel. It's 1 in 7 twist. So stainless steel barrels typically are much more accurate. That's kind of how you get that 1 minute gun or better, but they have about a 10,000 round barrel life before they start opening up. I have the Ops Inc. collar and brake. So on top of the brake right now, I have a flash hider. This was made for a foreign contract for a country that wanted to be able to eliminate the flash, but not have to use the suppressor. This barrel twist is 1 in 7. Typically, you'll see 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 twists. That kind of helps stabilize the heavier rounds that you want to use with this kind of rifle. And then we'll also see a 1 in 7.7 twist. That's been optimized for the 77 grain ammunition. Moving back, we have this LaRue free float forend. This is a quad rail, as you can see. I kind of like this rail a little bit more than the Knights rail because it feels a little more rounded off than the Knights rail. Fits better in the hand. They also incorporated QD cups in the sockets back at 3 and 9, which I'm a big fan of. And I've never had any issues with it. It works pretty well. You can do whatever kind of modernized rail you want. This is just what I went with at the time. Upper and lower, all of this is a standard Colt. We have the Geisley Super 42 spring and buffer in here. I think that does give a lot smoother cycling of the rifle and probably aids in reliability, as Bill Geisley claims. The Geisley SSE trigger. Big deal as far as the user interface, being able to wring all the accuracy out of this rifle. A good trigger is key, and the SSAE is probably my favorite for this kind of application. The classic SOPMOD style stock, so it'll give you a nice cheek wall on an optic like this, which is necessary as the eye box gets tighter as magnification goes up. And then lastly, the Sierra Precision Grip, which we've seen before. I like it because I can get my thumb on top and a consistent hand position that enables me to really isolate the trigger finger. Other things that I've done to help the shooter, myself out, the Harris bipod on the LaRue mount with a little bit of swivel in here. I've tightened it down, taken some of the slack out there. We'll talk about the bipod position in a second. And then the Sling, this is a Patriot Military Trading Co. Sling. They're at Chesapeake, Virginia. What I like about it is that the adjuster is up front. It's in one position. So if I ever have to loosen the sling rapidly, it's always in the same spot. Because of the design of the sling, right, I can get it really tight on my body. Another thing that helps with getting the sling tight and also adding stability as needed is having a QD cup up front, so I can move the sling forward if I have to or want to. And then I will just stow the sling underneath that band like that. Pretty simple there. Back to the bipod. So I always like to mid-mount it. What that enables me to do is run it as a barricade stop. So I can push the rifle into a barricade and then have my hand on top like that, locking it in. Make sure I get this on top of wherever I'm putting the rifle on, so I'm not getting any barrel touching any obstacles like that. I can run it with the inside bipod down and kind of use that as a foregrip if I want. What it also allows me to do is if I'm shooting off of a hard surface, like ground in a urban environment, I can get my hand down here just like that kind of lock in that bipod so I'm not getting any bounce. So big fan of putting the bipod kind of centered up on a rail like this. Nice thing about having a QD attachment like this LaRue mount is I can put it really anywhere I want, on the rail as needed. To the optic, right, a big part of this rifle is going to be the Knife Force 2.5 to 10 by 24. They do not make this anymore. I think they make it with a 42mm objective lens, so a big bell sticking out in the end. This is kind of the smallest, lightest precision kind of optic package. It's been around for years. I'm still a big fan of it. It is a second focal plane, which means that the mill hash reticle that's in this optic, which is really, really good, those subtensions are only accurate at max power. So keep that in mind, especially if you're shooting off holds. It dials down to 2.5, which is pretty good. It is not daylight bright, so that's a bit of a bummer these days, but we've kind of compensated for that with the red dot, which we'll get to in a second. Big fan of Knife Force optics, especially this one, because they track very accurately and consistently. So if I need to dial 2.6 mils, it is dialing exactly 2.6. When I bring it back to 0, there's no issues like accurately returning to 0. One of the things that I do with the 0 stop is that instead of setting it on 0, I'll set it actually on -1, so down 1. That way I got a little bit of adjustment down if needed for some rapid on the fly zeroing adjustments. You'll see I have a capped windage turret, and then of course open up top for my elevation adjustment. So I have shot this gun out to 1,000, and of course I dialed all the mils for that. I now shoot that one on a hold. Badger rings, get that proper height for cheek weld, and then up front here we have a micro red dot on a LaRue mount. So why do we have it at 12 o'clock versus offset? I've seen some questions about that. Big thing for me is ambidextrous, so I can shoot equally well left-handed or right-handed. It keeps the weapon slick, right, as opposed to having it on an offset. The other issue in my mind with an offset is that having the optic sticking out on the end, it's a snag hazard. It also is a hazard to the optic if you fall. So if you're running around like so with the optic on the outboard side and you fall on that weapon system, you have a pretty good chance of either bending or breaking whatever the mount is that the optic's mounted to, not to mention potentially damaging the red dot. So those are a few reasons why I don't like it offset. Another reason I don't like it is because it's very easy to get a sight picture in a tube like this and not have the optic actually vertically over the bore when it is offset. You can induce some interesting external ballistic errors by having the optic out on a 45 or a 35. Just not for me. I don't prefer it. I have no issues with this kind of setup. We'll kind of discuss that a little bit too. So height over bore, it's not really that much. I think it's about 3.5. So I've kind of solved that issue a little bit by just developing a good chin weld position that I can kind of hop to between these optics, kind of build that neural pathway, if you will. And then I zero these at 50. So I would not use this optic at anything past 50. And if it was to be past 50, it's basically point and shoot out to 200 for reasonable sized targets. And then we have to use this with the understanding this is a primary optic when it accompanies the magnified optic within, say, 25 yards. So everything within 25, I'm going to be doing a hold over. Not a big deal, right? So at maximum, height over bore, that's the difference. So at 7, 5, 10 yards, anything within the realm where I need to use a red dot versus a magnified optic, that height over bore is not going to be detrimental. Say you had to do a low percentage or a high risk shot, you come back down to the magnified optic and take it with the magnified optic as opposed to relying on the red dot and the height over bore. Or you just train to take those shots with a high holdover, right? It's a training issue as opposed to a mechanical issue. I would say absolutely zero this red dot at 50. Definitely don't zero it at something super close like 10. Even 25, I think you're inducing a lot of external ballistic errors the further out you go. So I would do this one at 50, like I've done, and then I mark the top of the optic, so write 50 on it with a paint pen, so that me and everyone else knows that it is zeroed at 50 when they pick this weapon up if they have to use it. Being top mounted also enables you to easily use passive night vision with this. You get a good head up position similar to the night skyscraper mount. So I kind of have like a Unity or a night's high mount, and I just put like a sniper scope underneath it. So I've gained a lot of capability from this. When you're considering where you want to put it, 12 o'clock or offset, you really need to decide what's the purpose of that optic. Is it a secondary system? Is it a backup system? Tertiary, like what are you trying to do with this, and what kind of shooting are you doing? Let that be your guide. My way might not be your way. Some other quick tips for getting all the performance you want to get out of a light precision rifle such as this. Dope on the stock, it's a big thing. I also have a notebook where I have all the numbers, all the drops on this rifle from 100 out to 1,000 yards, and I have that all in 50-yard increments. So for instance, 0 out of 100, easy day, it's only hold overs, never hold unders. Then all the way to 13 mils, dialing or holding at 1,000. Another thing, keep in mind, that 20-round magazine really helps with nice low position. And your polymer magazines, your PMags, they're going to give a more consistent angle of feed for that round, so it's not going to smash into the feed ramps, and you're going to probably get a little more accuracy using a PMag as opposed to an aluminum mag. But we'll see there's some significant bulk penalty out of using a polymer mag versus an aluminum mag. It's all about application. You can get these from Brownell as part of their retro line. I think they're pretty affordable. Ammunition. The Black Hill 77 grain, the Mark 262 is really the king. You can get the IMI 77 grain. It's pretty similar. There is a point of impact shift, but they shoot just about as accurate as the other. I've gotten about 3/4 of a minute groups out of this gun, like very consistently. So it does live up to the hype. And then a rear bag, like this Armageddon rear bag, this little X-Wing, very light, small bag, but it's going to help you kind of get a solid position. So you're applying minimum input to the gun. I really like that they added this QD to the bag, so I can just hook it into the socket in the rear, and then I can't forget or lose the bag. Other stuff with a rifle like this, keeping an accurate zero, keeping the ability to rapidly transition between these is really key. I'm going to splice in a video at the end showing myself going from the red dot to the magnified optic and why you would do that in application. And then another thing with this is I would dial this to be 1 click more than you typically would prefer. That's going to help draw your eye into that tube, into that red dot when you're transitioning. So keep that in mind. I don't know everything there is to know about these rifles, but I do have a pretty decent knowledge base. If you guys have any questions, please let me know, and I hope to get back to you guys. Thanks.